Looks like we're off and running. So before we get started, let's open class with a word of prayer. Blessed are you, O Lord, our God, King of the universe, our Creator and Maker, and the one in whom we live and move and have our being. We're just thankful that we have life and that you've given it to us more abundantly. And we're so thankful for all of these things that you have revealed to us. We just pray, Lord, you would continue to keep our minds and our eyes open as we live in this most interesting of times. And we just pray that each one here, someday soon, will see you coming on the clouds of heaven. For we pray this in Christ's name. Amen. Okay, well, last week was kind of interesting. It sure was interesting to me. I passed our lesson on to everybody that I could think of. And as you will recall, I felt this thing felt like a burden to me. I mean, it felt like it weighed 2,000 pounds and I was crushed to the ground with it. But I got relieved of that burden during the week. You know how the Lord works. Sometimes He comes to you in still small voices. And that's basically what happened to me because, you know, I understood my place. I'm just a Sunday school teacher. And I wasn't given the responsibility to evangelize the whole world. I was only given the job to teach prophecy to those who would come. And the thought also came to my mind that, you know, we in this class, we'd be what I would call pretty common folk, you know. I consider myself a common person, run-of-the-mill, nothing particularly special about me. And when the Lord came the first time, who did He come to? Who? The angels. They announced His coming to whom? Shepherds. I mean, that's common people. And so my feeling is we have been given an announcement. Do with it as you will. But I know that in my own case, it was staggering to me. I certainly did not understand or even was even looking for the Antichrist and all this. I guess I should have been. I've studied. Steve went through Daniel 9 with us. We all knew that there had to be a treaty out there, and if we were getting close to that time, there has to be a treaty being signed with somebody. And so, like I said, the thing was pretty amazing to me, and hopefully it got your attention also. Yes?
It got my attention, but I was thinking about all the other prophecies. You know, we've got to be careful again about putting a date on it, even though years ago.
Well, I can do that because, you know, I'm a target.
But I thought about that. I thought that, you know, these are pointing to this quick return. So many other prophecies that have to be fulfilled. It could happen instantly. We don't know.
Well, I think that is a good observation, and that kind of leads us into the class today. And, you know, if this be true, what we believe to be true, then we should be able to go back, look at the Antichrist prophecies in Scripture, and it ought to make sense. If we've got this guy compartmentalized, then all of the other prophecies should be we should be able to see them revolving around his work. And it ought to make sense. And as you've heard me say, prophecy is of no value unless somebody understands it. I don't believe that God just makes prophecies to confuse people. And I think that when the times are right, and that's the way this Bible is written, isn't it? When the right time comes, all of a sudden people read it and, wow, well, that was there. And he kind of illuminates the matter that you're studying, if you're studying prophecy, when the time's right. It's just been the history of the way things work. And that's pretty much what Daniel 12 said. You know, Daniel, this is not for you. This is for people long time yet to come. And knowledge will be increased. Well, I believe that we are the recipients of that prophecy. So at any rate, what I wanted to do was briefly review last week's lesson and go over some of the big points and see what it has to say, see if anything else jumped out at you. Well, first point was this guy, Ali Khamenei, the leader of Iran, he qualifies as the Antichrist for a variety of reasons. First off, we know from Daniel 11:21, the Antichrist comes out of the Seleucid portion of Alexander the Great's kingdom. And so therefore, wherever the Antichrist is, he's got to be in that region of the world. And it turns out Iran is part of that region. So he qualifies on that count. He has a withered right arm and probably dim vision in his right eye. Well, he certainly has a withered right arm, all right. And he probably has dimmed vision. That's one thing I can't speak to because I can't find any information on it. But I can pretty well tell you, if you had about half a pound of C4 about this far away from you and it went off with sufficient strength to destroy your right arm, it didn't do your right eye any good. So, at any rate, I think from Daniel, or from Zechariah 11, he's a candidate, yes.
Don't make it do your hearing any good either.
Yeah, it doesn't do my hearing any good. This is for sure. Well, he was fatally wounded, yet survived. In Revelation 13:3, the guy in June of 1981, I mean, he was deader than a mackerel, according to all accounts. He bled out, and all of his vital functions ceased, and he was given a transfusion, and he came back to life. Now, that's the reports that I have read.
What was the occasion of that?
He was speaking at some, I'm not sure if it was a mosque or what. If you go on YouTube, well, go to YouTube and type in Ali Khamenei 1981. And there is they were filming it at the time. And you can hear him talking in the background, and then all of a sudden a big boom. And it goes through the whole story. And yeah, go there. And it's pretty interesting. But like I said, fits the bill for...
Do they know who did it?
What?
Do they know who did it?
Some group, well, you know, in that part of the world, everybody is mad at everybody else. This is another prophecy of the scripture that the descendants of Ishmael would be rowdy people. If they weren't attacking somebody else, they were attacking their brothers. And so, say again? Pretty much. And that's the way you change administrations over there. You blow up the guy who's currently in power. I mean,
Let's think about that.
that's not such a bad idea sometimes.
No, when we get Biden,
Trade a headache for an upset stomach.
Gary Freeman.
Okay, the next item is, and we'll go over this again today in context, and that is he will sign a covenant with the many of Daniel 9:27. You read Daniel 9:27, the many are never defined. It just says the many. And if you have heard me and others teach on the subject of Daniel 9:29, it kind of hand wave over that the many business. And Chuck Missler would have told you that the many, that's the many in the frame of the Jews or Israel. But it didn't say that. It just said the many, left it open to, well, later interpretation. There is a covenant that is currently being worked on and signed. Scheduled to be out of Congress in 60 days, and that review session ends somewhere around September the 18th or 17th or 18th, 19th, somewhere in that range. It's right in between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Very interesting. And then it says his kingdom will be different from previous kingdoms in the region. Daniel 7:23. But Khomeini is the first Islamic cleric to lead that country. He qualifies on that account. And as you've heard me say, my suspicion always was that this treaty, whatever it was, would be signed on a Yom Kippur. It's right down the slot for being signed on Yom Kippur. So, so many things here that just seem to line up. Now, there's one thing that we'll go over when we get there, and that is the treaty. If you read your King James, it says the treaty is for 7 years. treaty ain't for 7 years, but I'll go over that. Okay, the sign of the times. I love this one. Our resident philosopher and intellectual, Nancy Pelosi, Obama's diplomatic masterpiece with Iran will prevail. And we have to pass it so we can find out what's in it. Nancy Pelosi endorsed the deal as a diplomatic masterpiece, signaled that she and other House Democrats would vote to sustain Obama's veto of any Republican resolution attempting to block the implementation of the deal. It looks like, politically, this thing is going to go. And even if we find out that part of the deal that nobody knows, you know, there's side deals on this thing that they're not willing to talk about. Even John Kerry, that massive intellectual person that's running this whole show, he admitted he wasn't sure what was in there. I'm sure it's nothing important. We'll tell you after you sign it. So, you know, more of the same. I mean, as you have heard me say, I think our current governmental administration is composed of petulant children because we as a nation have behaved as petulant children and we have ignored the fountain of the waters. And here's my scripture of the day. But of the times and seasons, brethren, you have no need that I write to you, for you yourselves know perfectly well that the day of the Lord so comes as a thief in the night. For when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction will come upon them as travail on a woman with child, and they shall not escape. But ye, brethren, are not in darkness, that that day should overtake you as a thief. I think that me and thee can testify to the accuracy of that passage. We are not in darkness, darkness being a euphemism for ignorance. And that kind of, to me, puts a different light on the stories that have, you know, usually most people will use when you try to start trying to narrow in on the timing of the coming of the Lord. Well, nobody knows the day nor the hour. Well, of course, nobody ever bothered to figure out what the day and the hour were. Was it the rapture? No. And of course, I spent 3 hours trying to explain that story. And there is no passage that would prevent us from knowing the day nor the hour. So at any rate, to me, we are fulfilling that passage. We are not in ignorance. Now, I wanted to go over Daniel and several chapters in Daniel and just point out the background that Daniel was given regarding this, what we call the Antichrist, this prince who shall come. Now, Daniel chapter 7, it says, in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head on his bed, and he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters. Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, 4 winds of heaven strove upon the great sea. And 4 great beasts came out of the sea, diverse one from another. When you hear this, see this word, the great sea, what does that mean? These beasts are coming out of the ocean? What?
People bring seed to work with people.
It's people, places, nations, principalities, powers. These are people groups. The sea is a euphemism for this world. It's like a storm-tossed sea, wouldn't you agree? Everywhere there is trouble and turmoil, and this is not a really great place to be if you are interested in an eternity being here. I don't think I'd much care to be here for an eternity. So at any rate, these 4 great beasts. Now, interesting how he characterized these basically nations that are coming upon the scene. They are like wild animals. They go around tearing things to pieces. Perfectly good analogy of what they are. Now, reading along, now the first was like a lion, had eagle's wings, and I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand on feet as a man. and a man's heart was given to it. And of course, we know the story. That was Babylon, and who was the guy? Who? Nebuchadnezzar. He was the guy who was like a lion. And the man's heart was given to it, and behold, another beast, a second, like to a bear, was raised up itself on one side. In other words, one side was higher than the other, had 3 ribs in its mouth, of it between the teeth of it, and said thus unto it, arise and devour much flesh. Now we know who this is, and this one is,
Cyrus? Or would it be Belshazzar?
this would be the Medo-Persian Empire. And when they came together and amalgamated, there were 3 major battles fought before they came together, and there were certainly a lot of people killed, but then they amalgamated, but one side higher than the other. I believe the Persians were stronger than the Medes, and so this is symbolized by one side of the bear being higher than the other. So when we get over, and we're going to do this probably next week in Revelation, you're talking about the beast, it says his feet are like the bear. This is the bear. So the beast, the Antichrist, wherever the bear's feet stands, there you would expect to find the Antichrist. So this is another somewhat obtuse way of verifying the location of the Antichrist. And after this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon its back 4 wings of a fowl, and the beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. The leopard, also referred to in Daniel, which was Greece. And the personality behind the Grecian kingdom was Alexander the Great. And he had, upon his death, his kingdom was split in 4 winds, according to Daniel, north, south, east, and west. And the east of it, Macedonia, was given to one of his generals named Cassander. Thrace and Bithynia were given to Lysimachus, another one of his generals. And then the Ptolemy Legate, was given Egypt. And then the more interesting one was Seleucid Nicator, and he was given what's now we call the Seleucid portion of Alexander the Great, which runs almost all the way to India. It includes Iran, Iraq, southern Turkey, Transjordan, Lebanon, Syria, and that's pretty much the region. And so we'll see later that when we get to Daniel chapter 11, that it was out of this region that this beast, the Antichrist, comes from. So, moving right along, and after this I saw in night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth, and it devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with its feet, and it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. And I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them a little horn, and before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots, and behold, in this horn there were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. And I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hairs of his head pure as wool. His throne was like a fiery flame, and his wheels were like burning fire. So we have here in Daniel another beast being introduced, and we have this little horn which pops up in the midst of 10 horns, and then it says 3 of the first 10 horns were plucked up by its roots. Now, what this is basically saying is, at the end time, there is going to come a kingdom composed of 10 kings, and then another one, really an 11th one. And this is another, more information on the nondescript beast of Daniel, which I didn't bring up here, but I'll go over it briefly. Remember, Daniel saw a vision. He saw a vision, and the vision had a head of gold, shoulders of silver, belly of brass, legs of iron, and then the feet of iron mixed with clay. And there were 10 toes on that final expression. The head of gold, of course, was interpreted as Babylon. The shoulders and the arms of silver were Medo-Persian Empire. The belly of brass was the kingdom of Alexander the Great. The legs were of iron. That was the Roman Empire. And then matriculating out of them was this 10-toed kingdom. And that's the one we're interested in, because if this Antichrist guy is this mullah in Iran, he is destined to overturn 3 countries and scare the liver out of everybody else in the region, such that 7 more will just jump on the bandwagon. Don't hit me no more. And there's one thing about that region of the world. Whether you are evil or good, if you're winning, I want to be on your side. Yes?
Speculation here is, what if the 3 that are plucked out aren't plucked out by him, but are plucked out by the Psalm 83 war, where these nations come up against these, maybe they're Islamic nations perhaps, and they're coming against Israel. Israel defeats them in Psalm 83 war, and 3 of them are no more, and Israel takes up that land. You think that that could possibly be it?
Well, when we're speculating, your speculation is as good as mine, but I think, from what I can tell, this Antichrist guy and these 10 kingdoms that are around him are Islamic kingdoms, of which he overthrows. Now, one map.
Has he been indwelt at that time? Or is he still rising as the Antichrist? There's a difference in
I don't
your-
understand the context of your question.
He's not indwelt immediately.
We don't know that for sure. My suspicion has always been when he was fatally wounded and he came back to life, the life that came back into him was not his.
Okay.
I think that he, and if you watch how Khomeini, how he acts he is a silver-tongued fox, and he has the ability, like Hitler, to mesmerize his followers. Have you seen those pictures, by the way, of Hitler when he was speaking in one occasion in Germany? And the people, the camera was not on Hitler, it was on the crowd. And the crowd was mesmerized. It was like they were in a trance. And I believe that Hitler was demonically infused. And I think Khomeini is also. Now here's Iran, okay? Now, just knowing the evidence that we know today, for this prophecy to be fulfilled, let's assume that I've got it right, and that he has to uproot 3 countries. And put yourself in his place. Which 3 would you go after?
Small.
Well, you'd go after the weakest ones, wouldn't you?
Right now.
So here's Iran. How would you characterize Iraq? Big, strong country, able to withstand anything? They're completely shattered at this
If you got
moment.
Syria, and that would also fulfill a prophecy.
Syria, weak as they're like a linguine. They are so weak because they're tearing each other up right now. Little Kuwait down here. I mean, he could have Kuwait tomorrow afternoon if he wanted it. There's no defense down there. The only defense that Kuwait has is us. And do you think this administration is going to defend Kuwait right now? So I can come up with 3 countries real quick: Syria, Iraq, and Kuwait, that he could overturn in a heartbeat. Now, got to be 10 that jump on the bandwagon. And by the way, probably Jordan is not one of the 10, but might be. So if you were speculating, and you come up with 10 countries that have would be interested in joining this Antichrist group, I can come up with 10 pretty quick. I mean, it doesn't take too much of an imagination. First off, all of these guys along this coast, they can't defend themselves. And they're all Islamic. And if this guy comes onto the scene, by the way, he's going to at some point declare himself to be the Imam Mahdi. He is the Messiah. And he is going to be convincing. And so if you were one of these countries and you had the Imam and you were confident that he was the man, he was the Messiah, you'd want to jump on the bandwagon. And so to find 7 countries that would join him, I don't think that would be much of a of a deal.
I'm sitting there thinking now, it doesn't have to do with their, whether they're Shiites or whatever the other.
Shiites or Sunnis?
Sunnis. So that's, a lot of the battle is between those two in that sense. So if Iran is Shiites, then he would naturally go to those 7 countries or 10 countries first.
He would probably go to them, but in order to control the world, he needs oil, he needs Saudi Arabia. Yeah.
You know, the Sunnis and the Shiites are fighting about who the imam's going to be. Is it the bloodline or is it the appointed line? So he's going to prove that he's both.
Yeah. Well, this is the one unifying thing in the whole Middle East. They are all looking for the Mahdi. If this guy, Khomeini, comes onto the scene and at some point in the very near future declares himself by virtue of something, my suspicion is it's going to be by virtue of conquest. I think his army is just going to come over here and take on Iraq and run right through them, because there will be no resistance. We outfitted the people, the military in Iraq with our best equipment. They should have been able to defend themselves. And what happened the first time ISIS attacked one of their towns? They threw down their weapons and ran away. They left everything behind. There is no will to fight in those people. They're not going to fight. Huh?
Iran's been seeding the rebels in Yemen also. The thinking is they're going to come up from Yemen and attack Saudi Arabia and take Mecca. And whoever controls Mecca now is controlling Islam.
Well, once this guy convinces the Sunnis and the Shias that he is the Mahdi, you can pretty well rest assured the rest of these people are going to jump on board. Because just imagine the impact to the world. If this just region right here all was under one leadership, you could set the price of oil in anything you wanted. You would bring Europe to their knees. I mean, this would be one powerful thing, yes.
Like the list of North Africa there, Egypt, Libya, and other places like that. Are they going to fall in line with this?
No, Egypt is not. Now remember, when we were introduced to this guy in Daniel, we were introduced as, well, the angel in Daniel chapter 11 just didn't use any more, he didn't use symbolism. He just began to speak out. And you notice when you read Daniel 11, he doesn't give too much treatment to the kings of the east and the west, but the north and the south, there was a war constantly between the Seleucids and the Ptolemies. The Seleucids and the Ptolemies. One would come down and attack the other one, stay down there for a while, then they'd go back home. This guy gets strong, he'd go back up there and attack them, then he'd go back home. They never did completely dominate each other. And in Daniel 11:21, we're talking about a personality out of the Seleucid portion who reinvigorates that war between the Ptolemies and the Seleucids. And in fact, we find that one of the final things that the Antichrist does is he comes down here and attacks Egypt. So when he attacks Egypt, then he gets his hand slapped. But let's move on. I just wanted to show you the character.
What about Turkey? What about Turkey up there? They're very...
You have a really good point there. What if this whole region, including Turkey, were part of this amalgamation? Man, you would really have something now, because looky over here, you control the Bosphorus. You control all of the trade that comes out of the Black Sea. You would shut off pretty much all of the ability of the Russians to conduct commerce, at least with oil. So I'm just saying, it doesn't take a big intellect to see that if you can somehow get a 10-nation confederacy in that region of the substantial players, you could control the world.
We haven't even mentioned that Iran could likely come up and say, we have a nuke now.
Exactly right. Now, does anybody remember when I read to you the story out of 2nd Esdras, which talks about the Arab serpents fighting the Carmonian dragons, or wild boars, I think it calls them. And I pointed out to you that Well, if you just read 2nd Esdras, this thing sounds like nuclear war. It talks about stars being shedded on this part of the region, and it talks about a good part of Asia Minor being laid to waste. Hey, it sounded like nuclear war to me. Ancient Carmonia is the region right in here, right in the middle of Iran. So 2nd Esdras is, if you believe that prophecy, anticipates a nuclear war, it would seem to me, in that region. So, and then we have the Damascus prophecy, which has not been fulfilled yet, you know, that at one point Damascus will be a total ruin. Won't be anybody living there anymore. Sounds like it got nuked to me. So, this is the region of the world from which the Antichrist comes. He's not coming out of Europe. He's not coming out of the United States. He's not Henry Kissinger. That's hard for me to debate about that. But all it looks like right now is that this guy has pretty much been revealed based on the scripture, in my estimation. Yes?
I'm thinking on that, see, that's why I'm saying so much has to be fulfilled now in the next 50 days.
That's right. And that's why, what if you heard about this 5 years ago? Well, you'd go out and write books on it, wouldn't you? You'd have yourself a nice movie, probably, a video. The whole world would be exposed to it. Well, you got 50 days. And you think I could get a book written in 50 days? It probably would take 50 days and then nobody would buy it. But I'm just saying, the time, we don't have enough time here. We can't go around telling everybody that the Lord's coming in September, because nobody's going to believe you. And if you had, but by virtue of the fact that we have been and laid groundwork for the last year and a half, well, 50 lessons anyway, you have the background that when I tell you this, you might assign a little bit of credibility to it. And so I think it's just the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. I'm just sitting here mesmerized. So at any rate, go ahead.
I just want to say, in May, when I was in Turkey, in Istanbul, all of the people from Turkey that were on that eastern border, southeastern border, were now in Istanbul. They were, banging on the streets and everything. They're all moving out because ISIS is further into Turkey than anyone can even imagine. So I'm sure they'll be other.
Boy, oh boy. Well, so Turkey is going to be destabilized. They have kind of wanted to be associated with the Western world, but they were on the razor's edge. Well, are we going to be Islamic or are we going to be Westernized democracy? Right now, it's going heavily toward the side of being an Islamic state. I think they will be. And I think they are a really good candidate for the 7 that get added. I don't think Iran is going to waste its time trying to attack Turkey because it would be too big of a risk. But if you can talk them into joining the coalition, now that's another story. And so, you can figure out which 10 they are for yourself. Probably doesn't make a lot. Once again, all I'm trying to point out is, if Iran is the guy, he fills that bill nicely. There's 7 countries easily would jump on the bandwagon. 3 he could overrun tomorrow, and probably will. Sometime later on, sometime after September the 13th. Okay, a fiery stream issued before him, came forth from before him. This is talking about the Ancient of Days. Thousands of thousands ministered unto him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him, and judgment was set, and the books were opened. Well, you know what that is. We're talking about now the judgment period, and the books of the righteous, the Zadokим, the book of the wicked, the Benonim. Nope. Not the Ruachim, that's the holy wicked. And then the Benonim, those who are neither righteous nor wicked. And the books were opened. And I beheld them because of the voice of the great words which the horn spake, and beheld till the beast was slain, and his body destroyed, and was given to a burning flame. As concerning the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. Anybody want to interpret that last phrase for me?
Put in jail.
Huh?
Put in jail till into the
Oh,
millennial reign.
they are inerted for 1,000 years. And what happens at the end of the 1,000-year period? Hey, we got another war that comes down the road, the very final one. So these nations, for a while, are going to be set aside, but then they are not completely eliminated yet. They still have a purpose. So we know the outcome. The beast is going to be slain and burnt up. Now this Daniel 7, and I saw in the night vision, behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. And there was given to him dominion, glory, kingdom, that all people, nations, languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which will not be destroyed. Those clouds of heaven, by the way. We got clouds in heaven? I thought it was not a cloudy day there. Not a single one. Well, those clouds in heaven are me and thee in our new righteous apparel. And that's, well, we'll be there and we'll see that. And now that Daniel, I grieved in my spirit, and in the midst of my body, the visions of my head troubled me. I could understand why Daniel was troubled. He had all of this wonderful stuff, and he had not a clue what it meant. How frustrating. And I came near to one of them, that was one of these angelic beings, and asked him the truth of this, and he told me and made me know the interpretation of all things. This is typically the way Daniel worked. You get this big symbolism picture, which completely confused the guy, and then you have the angel comes along and said, well, now this is what this means. And so here's the angel, and he's explaining it. It says, these great beasts which are four kings which shall arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever and ever, and even forever. A lot of evers in there. A long time. Then I would know the truth about the fourth beast, which was diverse from the others, exceedingly dreadful, whose teeth were of iron, nails were of brass, which devoured and brake into pieces, and stamped the residue with his feet. That fourth beast was really interesting to Daniel. And of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the others which came up, and before whom 3 fell, even of that horn that had eyes, and a mouth that spake very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows. And I behold, the same horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them. That word saints, it means holy ones. And my suspicion is these are Jews. Jews that somehow finally see the light. And then until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High, and the time came when the saints possessed the kingdom. So there's coming a time when the kingdom will be here on earth for 1,000 years. Those who possess it are going to be, well, certainly the administrators of the kingdom will be Jewish people, but there will be people of all other types available and in that kingdom, though their numbers are going to be considerably reduced. I've heard some estimates that when you get through with Revelation and all of the destruction and everything that goes on there, there's roughly 1% of the population left. So 1% of 7 billion, 70 million people, that's pretty small. You're going to start all over again. So, let's see what the angel has to say. The fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon the earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and it shall devour the whole earth and tread it down and break it in pieces. The 10 horns out of this kingdom. Now, this is interesting. Devour the whole earth. That word is kol eretz. The same word that's used over there for the flood. The whole earth. Did Rome occupy China? No. But the whole earth literally means the whole country. By the way, speaking of the flood dilemma that I introduced you to, the Chinese have been drilling in the Tarim Basin, which was the place that I anticipated that Noah's flood occurred. And guess what they found when they drilled down? They found more water under that thing than are in all the Great Lakes. So there was, somewhere in the past, a lot of water in that region until it dried up. So, at any rate, where was I before I interrupted myself? The 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall rise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. Khomeini, he's diverse from the rest of them in that the kingdoms before were all secular kingdoms. Now we have, for the first time in Iran, a mullah, a cleric, in control of the whole country. He is diverse from the rest of them. So I would suggest to you, this guy's still a candidate. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change the times and the laws, and they shall be given into his hand until a time comes and the dividing of time. For 3.5 years, this guy is going to work his will. And then he's going to get his. But judgment shall set, and they shall take away his dominion, and to consume and destroy it unto the end. And the kingdom and the domination and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominion shall serve and obey him. Hitherto is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my cogitation. Thank you. Cogitate. I was going to say, I don't remember ever speaking that word before. I'll have to cogitate on that for a bit. They much troubled me, and my countenance changed in me, and I kept the matter in my heart. Are you making fun of me out there again? Oh. Not my job to be eloquent. So at any rate, Daniel, this poor guy, you got a feel for Daniel. I mean, the guy, he got all of this wonderful stuff, and he ain't got a clue what it all means. Yes?
Two questions. But the judgments shall sit. Is that from Christ? Number one question. And that other one, they shall take away his dominion. Who's they?
Well, let's see.
Is Christ, does he perform the judgment on Alan?
Oh, and they shall take away his dominion and to consume.
Who's
Okay,
they?
my suspicion is the they are those who are in control. Apparently, this judgment seat takes place in heaven, and those who are in control, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, they decide that this is it. He's had his run, and that's it. And of course, their power is such that once spoken, whatever they say, it happens, because the whole universe bends itself in obedience to his commands.
Don't you think this is a 3.5 year point, though, and somebody else is going to reign?
Well, the whole episode lasts for 7 years, but the last 3.5 are really the worst of it all. And of course, as we know from previous Daniel passages, that at the end of the first 3.5 years, this guy gets really the big head, declares himself to be God, puts the abomination of desolation in the Holy of Holies, and boy, it really gets bad from that point on. And we'll see that here as we go along. Any other questions on this? Listen, the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the people, the saints of the Most High. This to me it's the millennial kingdom. The saints of the Most High are going to be in control, and it will last forever. And once we finish the last 1,000 years plus this little time, as Daniel says, then we have the New Jerusalem coming down into heaven, and everything is all changed. But the interesting part here is where we sit in the scheme of things, which is just before, I believe, the advocation of the introduction of the Antichrist to the world. Now, over in Daniel, I just got a little bit of this to get a flavor for other of these Daniel prophecies relating to the Antichrist. It says, the rough goat, and this is another characterization of the king of Greece, or Alexander the Great. He was called a rough goat. And the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king, which is Alexander the Great. Now, that being broken, whereas 4 stood up for it, 4 kingdoms now stand up out of that nation, but not in his power. Exactly what happened. The 4 kings, the 4 generals of Alexander the Great, took 4 regions of power, but they were never anywhere close to the power of Alexander. And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are full come, a king of fierce countenance and an understanding dark sentences shall arise. This is our guy. This is the Antichrist. He's fierce countenance. You know, if you look at Khomeini, not Khomeini, but Khomeini, the predecessor of Khomeini, this guy, every time you saw a picture of him, I mean, he was not happy. And in fact, he said, Islam is not a happy religion. That's why he was always in black. I mean, gee, it makes you want to come right out there and join it, doesn't it? But at any rate, this guy continues the bill, fierce countenance, understanding dark sentences. This sounds like this guy has a connection with probably demonic forces. I mean, he being a demon himself, he probably would understand things that others wouldn't. And you know, Hitler, that was one of Hitler's big deals. He had a whole group of the occult that were out there trying to find things that could be used to further his power. And Raiders of the Lost Ark, well, that's somewhat speculated, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if there weren't a Nazi team out there trying to find the Ark of the Covenant. So at any rate, this guy, demonic. And his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. And he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper in practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. For a while, he is going to overwhelm Israel. I don't know if you've read much about this peace treaty that we're about to sign, but one of the corollaries to it is that we will defend the nuclear ambitions of Iran. I can't believe it. Now, this may mean that we're going to go down and try to remove the nukes from Israel. This is madness. This is absolute madness. But interestingly, this guy, this Antichrist, is either able to convince people of the righteousness of this deal, or those that he's making the deal with are deluded. So there's not too many other opportunities, no other way of interpreting this information. So at any rate, but he is going to get Israel. And remember, Daniel 13, 2/3 of Israel will be cut off and 1/3 passed through the flame. So perfectly consistent with what we know. And through his policy he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace he will destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, and he shall be broken without hand. But he shall be broken without hand. This vision of evening and morning which was told are true, wherefore shut thou up the vision, for it shall be for many days. He's just telling Daniel, I told you what's going to happen, but you can't figure it out. This is for somebody else to figure out. Me and thee, perhaps. Yes?
I hate to break it to you, but it's 10 to 12.
What?
You need to get us, you want to know this covenant.
Boy, oh boy.
We can order pizza. Yeah, we can just order pizza and have lunch.
Well, this is the good part. This is the part that I got interested in last week, which blew my doors off. And this is Daniel chapter 9 of the 70 weeks prophecy. And I'm going to start down here. And after 60 and 2 weeks, well, first off, there's 70 weeks. 62 weeks and 7 weeks. How much does that make? 69. What's going to happen? Well, after the two pieces, the 7 weeks, the 62 weeks, after the 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off and come to nothing. And then the question is, and he that strengthened a covenant with many. Now this is the literal. This is a Young's literal translation, because I wanted you to get this, because it ain't what you think it says. He hath strengthened a covenant with many. Almost a period. 1 week. And in the midst of the week, he causes the sacrifice and present to cease. What is this saying? The covenant with many does not necessarily have to be a covenant for 1 week, for 7 years. This 1 week is 62 plus 7, 69. This 1 week fills the requirement for the 70-week prophecy. It's entirely possible that the way this is written, it says, okay, here's the covenant that strengthens me. At the end of that covenant, you got 1 week. It doesn't necessarily follow that this covenant they make has to be a covenant for 7 years. It could be 15 years or 10. Because as the covenant is currently written, it's not for 7 years. It's for more like 15 years or 10 years. Of course, I haven't read it. I'm just repeating what everybody told me. But my point is, before I thought, well, they're going to have to renegotiate that contract and get her down to 7 years. But if you read the literal, that's not what it's really saying. It's just saying that this is the covenant that starts the 7-year period. Doesn't mean the covenant is for 7 years, but this final 7-year period starts at the signatory of this covenant. This covenant is with many. And as you heard me say last week, nowhere in this passage does the many, are they defined? They're not. Yes?
I'm not sure if it's necessary to go through the 15 years that they're talking about in the covenant arrangement. You know, as reality goes on, Iran may at any time fall.
Oh, they will. 3.5 years, it says they're going to break the covenant. If the covenant is, as we suspect, don't make any nuclear bombs, how do you break the covenant not to make any nuclear bombs? You make nuclear bombs, right? So this is eye-opening to me. If this be the covenant, in 3.5 years, we're going to have a nuclear Iran, and probably more than one nuke, because the technology's out there. This guy up in Pakistan, who has been, well, he's the one who's been peddling this technology all over the world. He peddled it to North Korea. I am sure that he's been down here talking to the Iranians. I'm sure that they've been talking to North Korea. So this little circle has come fully around. And now, at any rate, a point I wanted to make on this was 7-year covenant, probably not required. It can be a 15-year covenant, but the starting point of this covenant starts the 1 week count, the 7-year count. Any questions?